Hello YouTube, this is Sam Gerrans from Qur'an-Alone.com. Today is Wednesday, 29th of March 2017, and today I want to talk about something which really grows out of my own experience, but I don't think I'm the only person who has experienced this in all of history, so perhaps there is a wider application, and it's the difference between talkers and doers, more particularly talkers and doers as concerns what might loosely be called the Qur'an-Alone movement, if you want to use that sort of terminology. Now, the kind of approaches that I get fall into several categories. Quite clearly, there are people who have looked at my work, read it, understood my methodology, and get it. There are those people who haven't done any of those things, but have listened to some of my YouTube presentations, and various sort of shades in between. Generally pertaining, I think, to the second category, to people who maybe have listened to one or two, or maybe a number of my YouTube presentations, but haven't understood or looked at my work, which is the Quran, a complete revelation, which as ever you may download for free from Qur'an-Alone.com. These people are quite difficult to deal with as relates to my inbox, because often they've got a theory. I call it a pet theory, and they want to tell you this theory, and they're very sure that this theory is correct. And it's the same conversation. It doesn't matter what the subject is, whether it's what they think Ramadan means, or what they think this means, or what they think that means. And whether Musa crossed the sea at this point or he crossed the sea at that point, whatever it is, it doesn't really matter, because the content of the conversation isn't really of any interest to me. It's the dynamic of it, and the dynamic is always really the same, which is that they approach me with this thing, and either I ignore it because I'm too busy doing what I'm doing now and doing other work, or in the occasions when I have tried to respond, the dynamic is pretty predictable, and I'll get into that as I go through it. And the reason why I'm doing this quick talk is because I want something that I can just send to these people the next time this happens. When you do what I do, you have to learn a new way of communicating, and I don't spend personally any time on forums and the like, because I find it a complete waste of time. I have to use the very limited time that I have to be as effective as possible. So it just makes a lot more sense for me to make one video that I can just leave out there and also send a link to answer people than it does for me to spend a lot of time answering people individually, especially since most of those people, frankly, they don't really care what you say, as I think I might touch on as we go forward. Now, the first point is, why don't I respond? So Neo_Zorg from Planet whatever it is, with an avatar of a porcupine playing the guitar, he's got his little theory, or a big theory, I don't know, and I'm not even saying that he's wrong. I don't know if he's right, but he can't prove that he is. So this is really the point. He's written to me typically with his idea, and really the implication is what you've done, Sam, is good. Not that obviously Neo_Zorg has read it, of course, but he's got some minuscule, usually, understanding of it, usually gleaned just from listening to a very short piece of one video. And he doesn't understand that these videos are hooks into the work. That's why I do all of these videos. And he wants to engage. And he doesn't like it when I don't respond, and he doesn't like it when I do respond, I come back to him with very specific criteria. Now, my point is this. Firstly, I'm not holding myself up as the arbiter of everything. I certainly not. But I do claim that I've done my due diligence. And what my philosophy, if you want to call it, is that you do your due diligence too, and this is how you do it, because I've got a methodology for doing it. And I'll get into that as I go forward a little bit. So it's very easy to scattergun with ideas. Now, I'm going to give you a sort of an analogy from life and other experiences, professional experiences that I've had, and it's to do with screenplay writing. Now, I have had to write screenplays for various reasons, and screenplay writing, film writing, something that everybody thinks they're good at. Everybody's got an idea. You see, everybody you meet's got, hey, I've got a great idea for a story. You and everybody else, my friend. Everybody has a great idea for a story. It's not difficult to have a great idea for a story, because people don't really understand what stories are. What they think is they've got this oh yes, and this happens and it's wonderful. Maybe, but probably not. Writing screenplays is incredibly difficult, and there are reasons why it's difficult. I'm not going to go into all of those, but whilst it's incredibly difficult to write a screenplay, what's not difficult is to have an idea. What's a little bit harder than just having an idea, but also not very difficult, is just writing one scene. And he says to her, and she says to him, and then this happens. Yeah, you can write a great scene, but what's really difficult is to write an entire screenplay which holds to a genre and is both familiar and surprising, and where all the narrative threads tie up like perfect equations. It's like a pair of old slippers. You know that a detective novel or a detective film is going to be like this. But if it's just like that, it's no good. It has to surprise you also. Yet it has to be true to the genre. And each scene has to push the story forward. And your idea has to be the DNA which almost underpins this entire 90 minutes and takes you from position A to position Z through a roller coaster which actually follows a pattern that you already subconsciously know, and yet does it in a way which surprises you. That's really, really difficult, and not many people can do it well. And we all know that because we're all an expert on what films do and do not work. This is really hard. And this is why people don't patent ideas for stories. You can talk about your idea for a film script because it's so hard to write a good story, to make a film, especially films. Novels, you've got a lot more leeway. But a film is cut down to the bone. And we all know when it doesn't work. We're all experts in it subconsciously, but I've studied it consciously, and I know what works, how it works, why it works, and why it doesn't work. It's like studying the machine code of a computer. This is an analogy for the type of work that I've done on the Quran, because it's very easy to have an idea, okay? But from my perspective, it's just like somebody say, hey, gee, I've got a great idea for a film. There's this guy and this girl and they rob a bank. Yeah, okay, you and everybody else. It's also quite similar to business ideas. Now, naive people who are just going into business, usually young people, are very, very protective of their great idea. And they don't want to tell the investor about their fantastic idea. And the reason is because they think that this idea is really worth something. It's not worth anything until it is something, and making it into something is really tough. This is comparable in some ways to the work that I've done. So I'm being approached by people who haven't done the work, and not only have they not done the work, they haven't understood my work, and yet they have a little idea. I don't mean that to be in any way insulting, but it is a little idea, and they want you to take it seriously. Now, I'm not even saying whether their, what I'm calling here, little idea is right or wrong. For all I know, it may be right, but they can't prove it. And until they can prove it and demonstrate it as a part of a bigger structure, to me, it's just spam. Now, for those who haven't read my work, but perhaps would like to, I'm going to outline what I've done. What I've done in my work, The Quran, A Complete Revelation, is to present a complete methodology. I've analysed all the parts, all the little ideas that I'm using to describe our friend Neo_Zorg, but they fit into a whole on the basis of that methodology. Not only that, but I provide evidence in terms of pan-textual references. And believe me, this is painstaking work for all of these parts. The whole is 536,000 words. Less than half of that is the Arabic original and the English translation. And the English translation is merely a function of the methodology which I set out and the supporting evidence. And these talks, what I do here on YouTube at this stage in my strategy, are small, simplified little pills which give you a little window into this huge work that I've done. And just because you've done this work, you can't just then put it out on the internet and expect everybody to read it. They're not going to do that. So I try to break down little bits of it to whet the appetite so that those few people, and it is a few people, it will always be a few people, and I'll get back to that as we go forward, can read it and understand it. So I'm just trying to put the reason why I'm not in awe of a pet theory into some sort of perspective. Now, I get regular approaches from Neo_Zorg with his pet theory, but he has failed typically to understand my methodology, even in the kind of barest outline. What he's doing is presenting 2 or 3 what effectively are random ideas, even though, and it could possibly potentially be that he is quote unquote correct, but it doesn't matter to me because he can't prove it. So how can he prove it? Well, to prove it, you need to do what I've done, which is to build a 3-dimensional, fully referenced model. Because I have done that, I can see that he hasn't, and that's all right. But you're coming to somebody who's put together a 20,000 piece 3-dimensional jigsaw puzzle with your 3 bits lying flat on the table and saying, look, you haven't considered this. Well, again, I go back to my screenwriting analogy. Yes, you have a great idea for, a quarter of a scene, but a quarter of a scene does not a full screenplay make. Even though it may be an amazing scene, who knows? It doesn't matter. Because the way that I work, the way that I have developed this is on a 3-dimensional strategic level. And I haven't kept my methodology a secret. It's in the opening pages of the work, which I give away for free. So, the onus is on you to go and do your homework. I'm not being disrespectful. It's not a matter of disrespect. It's a matter of parity. You haven't done enough, Neo, for me to care, you see, because you are not presenting your findings in the kind of context that I'm presenting mine, and yet you're wishing to ascribe to yourself or to claim, to arrogate to yourself some sort of parity, and when you haven't earned it. Anyone can put together a 2-dimensional puzzle, a small part of a puzzle, and claim knowledge. But for it to be comparable to what I've done, you need to build an entire 3-dimensional puzzle using all the pieces and then point to your little bit in that context and say, look, this fits, and it fits better than what you've done. And if you did that, I'd go, fine, great, thank you. So it's not that I'm standing on my own authority or something like this, but I am able to distinguish between a very small part of a 2-dimensional plan and an entire structure which fits together and is integrated, going back to my screenplay analogy earlier. So, just to be very clear, I don't set myself up as a guru of any kind. However, I have done my due diligence, so it's not that I'm just going to fall over and go, oh yes, well, a lot of people think this, I'm sure it's right. No, I've got evidence and I produce my evidence, and I'm waiting for yours, Neo. So let's see it. My intellectual achievement, if I were to identify one thing of which I am proud that I've done, is the identification and the implementation of the methodology that I'm begging people to look at and to apply, and which people don't. My position is this: bring something better and I'll follow it. I think that's a fair position, but it must be better. 2 or 3 pieces that lying flat seem to fit perfectly out of a 20,000 piece 3D jigsaw puzzle, to me is circumstantial. It's not more than that. Now, I don't hide my work. My methodology is clear, and as I say, it's set out in the beginning of my 536,000 word life's work, which you may download for free from Qur'an-Alone.com. And my advice is take it and see if you can improve on it. And if you can do, great. But be warned, it's hard. I know, because I did it. And it's work. And it requires meticulous comparison. It requires tenacity and the ability to stick at it and test and test and test and test and test and be prepared to be wrong. Because I didn't come to this with, this is what the Quran means. I worked on an iterative testing basis. And it's a habit of mind. And this is I think, my contribution. Because I'll tell you the great thing about this methodology is it's not dependent upon Sam Gerrans. It's not dependent upon how intelligent or amazing or otherwise I may or may not be. What it's dependent upon is evidence, but three-dimensional evidence that holds together with integrity in the context of the whole. And understanding what this process is the first step. But if you want to take it further, apply it. You'll begin to see how hard it is, and perhaps you'll also begin to understand what I've done. Now, I'm not claiming that I'm right on every single point. In fact, I don't think it's even possible to be quote-unquote right in every single point. I regard the Quran as a phenomenon of almost the natural world. The way we might understand light refraction 100 years ago and the way we understand it today are different. Now, does it mean they were idiots 100 years ago? No, they weren't. Did we learn something from them and build on that today? Yeah, we certainly did. So I don't see it as an either-or proposition, but I want evidence, or scientific, in the real sense of the word, not in the modern scientism sense of the word, not in the Neil deGrasse Tyson sense of the word. I mean real evidence. So if you can bring it, fantastic. But you have to understand the structure within which I'm working. And if you can't bring something comparable, then I'm not going to consider it. So in summary on this part, this is why I'm not interested in small quote-unquote pet theories. Because they're little bits of a huge puzzle, and I know how huge it is because I've solved it, or I've presented a solution, and not only presented the solution but given all of my evidence, which is attested to in the over 9,000 notes and the 24 articles which are meticulously referenced in support of what I'm saying on a pan-textual basis. My advice is study that and aim to fault it and improve it. That's my advice. So whilst, you may be right, the king under which Yusuf lived, his cup was made of alabaster or perspex or whatever it is. I don't know. But you need something more than a very localized idea of why that's the case. And we'll get on to whether it matters in a minute, which it probably doesn't. If you were really serious, you would take and improve my system, or you would create and demonstrate a better system, and I'm open to either. But arrogating to yourself an equivalence when you haven't done either of those things, to me, it's not interesting. But if you do it, I will take it seriously. But in the absence of this, from my position, it's just spam. Now, I just want to make a sort of an aside, and again, this is a bit of an analogy to try and get home to people who perhaps haven't or probably won't go through my work and understand it in its full complexity. I once knew a guy, and he was a mechanic, and he explained to me what they do with cars after they crash and how they put a car back into shape. And it's very simple. What a car has, any modern car has, it has basically a floor plan of key points in the chassis. And so if something's bent out of shape, they don't try and sort of push it. They just pull it. They pull the corners of this thing until key points line up. And if those key points have lined up, then the car is in the right shape and the chassis has been corrected. This is in some way analogous to my process and experience of working with the Quran, is that when something is correct, it lines up, click, 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 across the entire text. And when you get that and you begin to work in that system, you'll see why a lot of these pet theories, and we all have them, tend to fall away. Either they become irrelevant or they actually become debunked on the basis of that analysis. Moving on to the next subject, which I think is in some way related. I think people are not so much troubled by what they don't understand in the Quran as they are by what they do understand in the Quran. The core baseline position, for me anyway, is to believe in God and the last day and do good works. The Quran says in Surah 2 Al-Baqarah, they have their reward. Now, there isn't any qualification to this. It's not if you're a this or you belong to that group, or you're Qur'an-Alone, or you're a traditionalist Muslim, or you're a this or that or the other. It lists various different groups and sects. But the point clearly is that anybody who believes in God on the last day and does good works, they have their reward. And this is really the point. It's not about talking good talk. And whilst there's nothing wrong with talking and analysis, I do think that a lot of people confuse the conversation with the action, and they're different things. So those are the fundamentals. So if you want something to concentrate on, I would say concentrate on that. We all know what good works are. We all know what believing God is. We all know what the last day is. Put those three together and build your life around that. And I think that you have a successful life and you'll be successful on the day of judgment. That's really the foundational position, fundamental position, which now brings me from fundamentals onto fundamentalists. I have been surprised in the course of my work, because when I started this, believe me, I am not an idiot. I knew what stepping out and sticking my head above the parapet on this particular subject, I knew what I was getting into, and I knew the consequences that it could potentially have for my family, and it certainly had those consequences financially. It was career suicide. Okay, so I know whereof I speak. I've put my life and my reputation and my income on the line, so I do know what I'm talking about on this one. However, I assumed that I would get quite a lot of crazy Allahu Akbar, kill the kafir guy sort of Muslims. And to be fair, I mean, I've had a few, death threats and blah, 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 but relatively few. And it's because I suppose, the channel's not over a certain amount of numbers and, whatever, they probably is not big enough threat, etc. I tend to block those kind of people anyway from the channel and just, I just like house clearing, admin. However, it's not huge numbers. The much bigger sort of drag on resources are the debaters from the quote-unquote Qur'an-Alone theorists society. My advice to those people is do something. I mean, really go out and do something, or help someone who is doing something. But don't make the mistake of confusing this chat, and it is endless chat, with action. Just as an aside, I mean, I'm reading from notes here, but as an aside, when I first became interested in the Quran, started studying it some 20 years ago now, the internet was just starting, and I actually recognized some of the names of people who were talking then. I did engage in one forum where I met some people, but after that I didn't engage in any forum, and that forum was taken down. And thereafter I realized that it was largely pointless, this endless talking. So I dedicated myself and my time to study, to produce something rather than just talking. But I see the same names 20 years later, these young men, now middle-aged men, still talking. And just talking, I don't know what the value is to it. I think what we need are people who can think and do as much as we need people who can talk. I mean, I talk on this channel, of course, but this is just the front end of an engine of work. It's not the work. This is just a window into it. Again, advice, if, for what it's worth, is leave the complexities. Just move on to the basics. Believe in God and the last day and do good works. And that's really the core of my ideology. And the second core of my ideology is warning the elite as God's mechanism for ending tyranny. Now, this is not dependent on my translation, although I point it out rigorously in my notes. Once you see this, you can't unsee it. I don't care which translation you read. Once you see this, the thing that your mullah never, ever, ever identified to you because he got you wrapped up in some made-up religion. Once you see this, you can't unsee it. This is the job. And if you don't believe we're living in a tyranny today, well, I'm just sorry for you. Clearly there isn't anything I can do to help you. But this is the basis of my philosophy. It's the basis of my interest. And setting up a small community, and it will be a small community. I'm not even interested in numbers. Look, if you download my work, look who I dedicate my work to the few. I'm not confused by this myth of numbers. It's always a few good men, always. Look at the Quranic model, always. So if you don't like me, you don't like what I do, or I've got this criticism, Sam, he's wrong about it. I don't care, my friend. I do not care. You're responsible for yourself. You're responsible for your works. And I'm responsible for me, and I'm responsible for mine. My advice is get on and do something real, whether it's with me, without me, whatever, but do it. But don't confuse chat with action, because they're not the same. Now I'm going to get on to my last sort of point in this talk, which is where I was wrong. When I began this, I assumed that my audience would be coming from the truther community, people who understand about 9/11, people who understand about vaccines, people who understand about the New World Order, people who understand about chemtrails, all of this stuff which is just absolutely obvious to me, but not to a lot of people. I thought that these would be the people with an appetite for truth who would pick up what I'm doing. I tended to think that the entire Muslim, quote-unquote, society was just too far gone, too brainwashed. I mean, after 1,400 years of a mind job like this, I really didn't hold out any hope for it, quite frankly. And given what I'd seen in the mosques, just, nonsense. Not to say that the Islamic world has any sort of monopoly on nonsense. I mean, just look at the liberal insanity that we're living through in the West. However, that group that I thought was really my target audience is unable to understand the power of the few. If you listen to these people, and there are some fantastic people among them, but they're endlessly going on about, when enough people wake up and when the masses arise and awake and overthrow the New World Order, the elite, whatever it is. No. This isn't how it works. It's never actually how it works. And the elite know that because they're 0.0001% of the population and they control absolutely everything. So they have us believing in this numbers thing where they don't believe it, of course. It's nonsense, along with all the other nonsense they've got most people believing. It's very difficult, in fact, it's impossible to disabuse people from this sort of quote-unquote truth background about the idea of numbers. Numbers are not important. A few good men, that's the Quranic model. I don't see anywhere in the Quran where a demographic shift of a lot of people liking something changed anything. The model is always one man or a few men standing up, speaking out. That's the model. I didn't choose it, and I can't say that I like it, but I can see that that's what the model is. Now, people from this particular background, they cannot / will not get this. Now, I have a really good handle on data. I know a lot about my audience, and where I was wrong, and I can say this because I got the facts, somewhere in the region of 80% plus of the people who do something, and for Neo_Zorg, just to make a distinction here, Neo, doing is not talking, doing is actually doing, okay? So when I'm talking about doing, I'm talking about people who either support me financially, really, as in actually doing something, or they actually help doing something real, fact-checking, checking over documents, proofreading, giving their time and their efforts. And I frankly don't care which it is because it's all good to me. So I'm talking about people who do, really, really do. And this is over 80% of people from, judging by their names, from cultural Muslim backgrounds. And these people are doers and not talkers. So I was dead wrong on that one. I mean, amongst these people, there's a few Davids and Henrys and Charlottes, but generally the names are all, people are Pakistanis, they're Arabs, or of those extractions. And I can't tell you how grateful I am for these people, and how pleased I am that I was wrong. And it's nice to be wrong. And going back to my original point, prove me wrong, but prove me wrong on the basis of real data. And I'll tell you something else interesting about those people. The number of people who really assist me and who get what I'm doing and help me. Do you know how many of those people have tried to engage me in pointless conversation or endless debate about any subject, whatever? The answer is 0. To make it into an aphorism, doers don't talk and talkers don't do. It's amazing, but that's how it is. So these few help, both in terms of material and practical help, and it's given simply, without fanfare, and quite frankly, it's often hard for me to find them, to thank them. To follow on from some of my previous points, I'm sure that quite some number among those people who really do something and to help me in my work disagree with me. I'm sure they do on some finer points here and there. And that's fine. But they don't allow that to stop them from understanding the broader context of what I'm doing and to help me. So I'm very happy to be wrong in this. And I'm equally happy to be proved wrong on any other front. But again, on the basis of real data that integrates with a finished whole, not just a scattergun approach of I have a little idea, a little theory, it may or may not be right, but now you've got to take me seriously because you haven't finished your work. That's what it is. And I know how much work it is, going back to my opening comments, because I've done it. So in conclusion, I'm not setting myself up as a guru. Don't believe we actually need them. We have the Quran, and Quran is guidance. And the things which are clear in the Quran are clear. And if they're not clear in the Quran, well then really what you need to do is to concentrate on the things which are clear. And I do think that the things which are not so clear to you become clear when you act upon what you do understand. What I have done is created and demonstrated a method, a methodology, and if it is truly bettered, I will be grateful and I'll accept it. But I don't respond to all and any pet theory that I'm sent, because I know how much work it is to create the entire edifice, and I can also see that the person sending me this hasn't done that work. I also note that when I have taken the time to outline to such people the criteria, what they are for me, and on what basis I would accept their thoughts, that's the last I ever hear of them. Because what they want is they want to debate on a level with somebody. They haven't done the work. You need to earn your place in this particular ring. It's not a talking shop for me, and it's not democracy. Not all opinions are of equal validity to me. I don't care how many people think whatever. What I do care about is demonstrable evidence. Even if it's just one person presents it and he's done his work and it fits and he can prove it and I can see that he's done it, I'll take it. So I'm not interested in democracy. I'm not interested in numbers. I'm interested in evidence and truth demonstrated. And that's two little bits of a 20,000 piece jigsaw puzzle that happen to fit together is not evidence to me. There's a lot of blue sky in a 20,000 piece jigsaw puzzle, and pieces can seem to fit. But when you've got the whole thing done, then we'll have a look at it. And finally, I'm also very grateful for that small number of people, again, mainly cultural Muslims, but not only, who have studied my work and put their actions behind their convictions by supporting me or engaging in their own works on the back of what I've done. I get messages all the time from people who, they don't support my work, but they say, what you've done has really helped me. I'm now setting up a study group, or I've written a book, or some of the most rewarding ones, people say, I've become Muslim because of what you've done. I've repented to God and now I'm living a different life to the life I lived before. That's fantastic. So I don't care what the output is. I don't care if it impacts me directly. I'm investing in the life to come. This is my investment. For every single person who lives a better life because of what I've done, I have a share in that. And I'm very happy with that. As to the rest, for people who don't help me or don't do particular works on the basis of what I've done and won't read my work, I appreciate the fact that you do consider my work, at least at a very superficial level, in my channel and what I'm presenting here. But do understand, I'm not here for numbers. I know it's a difficult concept for people to get when we're living in a world in which Kim Kardashian's bottom is going to dwarf any numbers of people who will ever see and like my videos ever. Okay? I cannot compete with her derrière. It's not possible. So numbers don't matter to me particularly. However, if you do good works, it's for your soul, just as me doing good works are for my soul. So what you do is your choice, and I'm quit of thee. But as for the debaters, either put up or frankly shut up. Either do the work and present real evidence, and I don't just mean two little pieces which seem to fit together, I mean actual real evidence comparable to what I've done, or leave me alone, or just be happy with the fact that I'm not going to respond to you. Stop confusing talk with action, because they're not the same. Okay? We're living in a spectator society where people think that just because they watch something or like it or follow it or tweet it or retweet it, that's action. No, it's not. It's a voyeurism given a credibility that it frankly hasn't earned. Either help me or do something real yourself using your own name. You'll soon see how hard it is. Hiding behind an avatar, hiding behind some special name you made up. It's very easy to be brave. Put your life and your reputation and your career on the line, and then we'll talk. I would also say read the Quran again and consider what I'm telling you. And you will see that the model is a small number of men who warn the elite prior to the warnings of God becoming binding. This is the model. I don't care about your theory about Ramadan or this or that or the other. What I've just outlined runs through the Quran like Brighton through a stick of Brighton rock. If you can't see that, then there really isn't anything to talk about anyway. And in my final point is that after this, after listening to what I've just been through now, you've been warned, and you should also understand why I don't engage with you. I hope you will do your work. I hope you will do your research. I hope you will cease to conflate or confuse action and conversation. And I honestly hope that you will build a life around action, which is based in faith, rather than thinking that just being a member of a talking shop is really the what God wants for you. You can die at any moment, and you're not going to take your good conversations with you. It's not going to happen. What you take with you is your faith and your works. So I would say concentrate on those. If you don't like what I do, and you don't like what I say, and you don't like what I've done, that's fine. But go and do something. That's my advice to you. That's all for now. If you're listening on YouTube, you can download my full translation of the Quran free using the button in the top right-hand corner, or buy the hardback there at 10% less than on Amazon. I also encourage you to sign up for the Qur'anite Plus newsletter on the site to get occasional micro updates. Check my site at skypetalking.com for lessons and more. Like if you like, comment if you have something constructive to say, and subscribe to get more each week. And use the link in the drop down below to donate if you would like to help me keep doing this. And remember, this life is short, eternity is long. If you want good trees, plant good seeds.